How did somebody you know ruin their life in one day? My dad used a dirty needle while doing drugs and got HIV. In 2008, he told us he was living with AIDS because of that one day. We have helped pay for the meds or his bills because he paid for his meds and didn't have the money. Ever since last summer, he got COVID, and when the doc was talking to my sister on the phone, she asked what special treatment he would need to have due to having AIDS. His doctor of 20 years said, "What? He used to have AIDS." We haven't talked to him since. A buddy from high school blew through a stop sign and hit a couple of motorcyclists, killing them both. He didn't stop to render aid and fled the scene. He was busted for vehicular manslaughter and spent 12+ years in prison. He's lucky he can work for his dead, because where he lives now is not kind to felons trying to rehabilitate. He got drunk, got in his car, drove 90 miles per hour, missed a red light, and killed my niece and 3 other people. He's been in prison since 2009 and still has 6 years to go, as he pleaded out to 4 counts of manslaughter. Guy I knew in uni was inebriated and decided to try and clear a very tall spiked wrought iron fence. He impaled his balls and did not get to keep them. A friend of my parents was a good family man who loved his family. One day he was playing with his toddler and was playfully tossing her on the bed. She would get back up giggling and he would toss her again. In one of the tosses, he threw her a bit too far and she hit a bad post. She lived but became bedbound, unable to even talk. Not quite vegetable, but close. He went to jail on child abuse, lost his wife, his job, and his little girl would never be the same. The guilt was so much he ended it as soon as he could. A 19-year-old guy in Sydney ate a slug for a dare, got rat lungworm disease, went into a coma for 18 months, woke up a vegetable confined to wheelchair needing 24-hour care, died about 10 years later from eating a single slug. More like a day horribly altered my life. I was a teacher and coach. For a field trip, the principal could not afford to buses, so I had to walk about 10 girls to the field trip location and back to school, while the one bus was filled with the rest of the junior high students and faculty, about a mile each way. I chose the girls of my team because they would listen to me outdoors, unlike lots of middle school kids, while crossing the street in the crosswalk, with the walk signal in our favor. All the kids went first, and like girls they're clumped together and chatting while walking. I noticed a woman made a left turn into our crosswalk and never saw us as she tried to accelerate to beat an oncoming car. I knew she was going to run right through the girls. I pushed the kids forward, very forcefully. Most of the girls fell onto the pavement in front of other vehicles waiting at their red light. They were badly scraped up, like road rash from me pushing them, but no hospitals or doctors were needed for their scrapes. I don't remember the impact. I remember seeing a Pontiac symbol between the headlights. I came to, and I was in a whole different lane, and facing where I had just come from. I could not get up. They say my body went up the car and off the driver's side, tearing the side mirror off the car and breaking her windshield. Horror and sobbing from my student athletes. The girls raised me onto a backboard when the ambulance came, which must have been traumatic. Now, 20 years later, I am still an ambulatory wheelchair user. Can't teach or coach. Can't work at a desk. I have chronic pain. Yes, my life can be really sucky, but I would not change what I did that day. When I get low emotionally from all my limitations, I remember those girls. I watched them go to college, get married, grow into mothers, and hold impressive jobs in their fields. And when they show a photo on Facebook of their happy moment, it recharges me to know they are safe, healthy, and happy, and it reaffirms my decision to save them from harm. A week ago, my little sister slipped on the ice getting out of her car and hit her head. She didn't think much of it when she had a pounding headache later, figuring she just whacked herself good. Her friend told her to just sit down and take it easy until she started slurring her words roughly 10 hours after the fall. They called an ambulance for her, but she was going into cardiac arrest. Turns out she'd stopped taking her blood thinners she was supposed to be on for clotting issues. The headache wasn't the fall, it was the clot in her leg cutting off blood to the brain. At the age of 26, she never recovered and leaves behind a 4-year-old and 2-year-old. In college, my ex-friend was pulled over for speeding. He had drugs and alcohol in his system, and when the cop reached in his truck to grab the keys, he panicked and took off, thinking the cop would let go. The cop did not let go, and was dragged for quite a ways before eventually falling to the ground and hitting his head, resulting in his death. My ex-friend was charged with capital murder and sentenced to 20 years in a Mississippi state prison, 21 years old, and ruined his entire life in one night. 3 guys in high school decided to speed on the back roads after practice. Lost control. Driver was decapitated. Passenger, who was being scouted, had severe brain damage and unable to walk, eat, etc. on his own, and the third may have walked away, but for the rest of his life will have to live with the trauma. Great bunch of guys, just heartbreaking. Friend of mine from a wealthy Middle Eastern country family didn't quite ruin his life but fucked it up for a while. Was in Canada on a student visa but was working after graduating and had applied for permanent residency. Got rejected, so he took out every credit card he could find and ran them all up because he was leaving the country forever that week. Tells his parents he is coming home and why. Mom makes a few phone calls and turns out the kid had screwed up some paperwork and it was no problem to get it fixed up and approved. That was 15 years ago and he still lives here, but his credit card debt was more than his annual salary and his parents, correctly, told him he was an idiot and to pay it himself. He also lost out on a job opportunity the next year because his credit was such a disaster. Kid down the street had his best friend over, and his friend, being a 12 or 13-year-old boy, was being a total dickhead. Kid picks up a shotgun his brother left lying around in the dining room and aimed at friend. Friend taunted him. Kid pulled the trigger and filled his friend's head full of buckshot. Their families instantly devastated. Kid went to jail. I occasionally see the friend when I go out for a walk. He's a grown-up now, but is intellectually maybe 4 or 5 years old, and will be taken care of by family for the rest of his life. Friend's son was with his recently engaged fiancée who had a serious nut allergy. They were driving not far from Bendigo. They stopped off at a cafe to buy sandwiches. The woman running the cafe assured them there were no nuts anywhere near the sandwiches, so they bought them then went on their way. Driving out away from town, she was nibbling on the sandwiches when she struggled to breathe. He stopped the car, got out, figured what was going on, went to the back of the car to get her EpiPen, which he struggled to find, but by the time he did find it, she was dead. A couple of weeks after the funeral, he got in his car, drove it back to the stretch of roadside where she died, put his foot down on the accelerator, and deliberately aimed his car at a power pole. He'd left his mom a note. Childhood friend who relapsed from a drug addiction. He ingested fentanyl, died all alone in a filthy basement. He had been looking healthier. We reconnected and he was planning his life going forward sober. That hurt a lot. That hope being taken away in a few minutes. Fuck opiates, fentanyl, and those who deal it. Too many lives lost every day. Worked in Seattle airport, and a coworker decided to take his own life by stealing an airplane, fly it in loops around the Pacific Northwest airspace while being chased by the Air Force until finally going nose down. Share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to the channel. Good luck.